The conference room was silent. Ambassador Dren stood at the window, watching the stars that had always brought him comfort. Tonight, they only reminded him of how vast the universe was and how small his people had become. Behind him, the 12 members of the Velkhari Council waited. Their faces showed the same fear he felt deep in his chest. 3 colonies had gone dark in the past month. 3 entire worlds, millions of lives just gone. The last transmissions had been screams and static. "We must evacuate the outer systems," Council Member Vera said, her voice shaking. "Pull everyone back to the core worlds. We can defend there." "And when the swarm reaches the core worlds?" another council member asked. "Where do we run then?" Dren turned from the window. He was old, even by Velkhari standards. He had served as ambassador for 60 years, negotiating trade deals and peace treaties with dozens of species. He had always found a way to talk, to compromise, to find common ground. But the Kraith Swarm did not talk. They only consumed. "There is one option we have not discussed," Dren said quietly. The room grew even more silent. Everyone knew what he meant. They had all read the report from the archivists, the ancient database they had discovered in the ruins on Velkhari Prime. The precursor species who built the jump gates had left behind more than just technology. They had left warnings. "The list," Vera whispered. "The Apex Species Protocol." Dren nodded slowly. The precursors had catalogued every intelligent species they encountered. Most were peaceful, like the Velkhari. Some were traitors. A few were dangerous. And a handful were marked as something else entirely. Apex predators. Species so dangerous that the precursors had quarantined their home systems and left warnings in every database. "Do not contact. Do not approach. Last resort only." "Most of the species on that list are extinct," Dren said. "The precursors made sure of that. They wiped out civilizations they deemed too dangerous to exist. But not all of them," Vera said. "No, not all." Dren activated the display in the center of the table. A star map appeared, showing a sector of space the Velkhari had never explored. Red warnings flashed across dozens of systems, and in the center one name stood out: humanity. Class 7 warfaring species. Extreme caution advised. "What do we know about them?" a council member asked. "Almost nothing," Dren admitted. "The database entry is brief. They evolved on a world the precursors called Earth. They developed space travel approximately 400 years ago by precursor dating standards. They were marked for quarantine immediately. Why?" Dren pulled up the precursor notes. The text was cold and clinical. "Species demonstrates extreme aggression, capable of organizing large-scale warfare. Technology development focused primarily on weapons advancement. Recommendation: containment. If containment fails, elimination." The council chamber erupted in worried voices. Dren let them talk. He understood their fear. They were considering calling for help from a species that the precursors themselves had feared. A species deemed too dangerous to be allowed free in the galaxy. But the swarm was at their doorstep. In another month, maybe 2, the core worlds would fall. The Velkhari would be extinct. "We have no military," Dren said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We have never needed one. We have always believed that intelligence and diplomacy could solve any problem. The swarm has proven us wrong. We need warriors. We need killers." He paused. "We need humanity." Vera stood. "And what if they are worse than the swarm? What if we open a door that should have stayed closed? Then we will be destroyed by them instead of the swarm," Dren said simply. "But at least we will have tried. At least we will have fought." The vote was close. 7 council members voted yes. 5 voted no. Dren had the authority to break the tie, but he did not need to. The decision was made. That night, Dren sat alone in the communication center. The ancient precursor transmitter hummed with power. It had not been used in 10,000 years, but the Velkhari engineers assured him it still worked. The frequency was locked to the coordinates the database provided. All he had to do was send the message. He thought about his daughter living on New Haven with her family. He thought about the children playing in the parks of Velkhari Prime. He thought about the millions of lives depending on this decision. Dren began to record. "This is Ambassador Dren of the Velkhari Collective. We are transmitting on the emergency frequency as outlined in the Sentinel Protocol of the Precursor Accords. Our civilization is under attack by a hostile force we cannot defeat. We are requesting immediate military assistance. Coordinates are attached. Please respond." He added the tactical data about the swarm, their numbers, their tactics, their biology, everything the Velkari had learned before their fleets were destroyed. Then he sent it. The message disappeared into the void, traveling through the ancient precursor network at speeds faster than light. Dren did not know if anyone would receive it. He did not know if humanity still existed, or if they had destroyed themselves centuries ago. All he could do was wait. The first 3 days brought nothing. The council met constantly, arguing about whether they should begin evacuation. Dren watched the reports from the front. The swarm was spreading faster now. They had learned the Velkari would not fight back, and they were pushing deeper into Velkari space with each passing hour. On the 4th day, alarms screamed across every Velkari world simultaneously. Dren ran to the command center. Screens showed hundreds of red dots appearing on the edge of their home system. Jump signatures. Massive ones. Something was coming through the ancient gates, and they were coming in force. Is it the swarm? Vera demanded. The technician shook his head, his hands trembling as he worked the controls. No, these signatures are different. More organized. Military formations. He looked up at Dren. Ambassador, we are receiving a transmission. Put it through. The speakers crackled. Then a voice spoke, using the standard galactic language but with an accent Dren had never heard before. Velkari vessels, this is Admiral Helen Carter of the United Earth Defense Force 3rd Fleet. We received your distress call. We are here to help. The screen changed, showing the exterior view from their orbital stations. Dren felt his breath catch in his throat. Ships were emerging from jump space, hundreds of them. They were massive, larger than anything the Velkari had ever built. Gray and angular, covered in weapons and armor. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out across the system in a defensive pattern that the Velkari military had never managed to achieve. How many? Dren whispered. 300 capital ships, the technician reported. Twice that many support vessels, and he paused, checking his readings again. Carrier groups. They are launching smaller craft. Thousands of them. A new image appeared on the main screen. A human woman in a dark blue uniform. She had short gray hair and eyes that looked tired but sharp. This was Admiral Carter. Ambassador Dren, she said. We need to meet immediately. We have reviewed your tactical data on the swarm threat. We need to coordinate our response, Dren found his voice. Admiral Carter, we asked for help. We did not expect an invasion force. The human admiral's expression did not change. Ambassador, you sent a distress call citing an existential threat to your species. The Sentinel protocol is clear. When called upon, we respond with overwhelming force. This is how humanity helps. Dren looked at the fleet spreading across his home system. 300 warships. More firepower than the entire Velkari collective had ever possessed. They had called for help and humanity had sent an armada. He thought about the precursor warnings. Class 7 warfaring species. Extreme caution advised. Prepare my shuttle, Dren said quietly. I will meet with the Admiral. As he walked toward the hangar, Dren wondered what he had unleashed on the galaxy. The Velkari had been desperate. They had made the call because they had no other choice. But looking at the human fleet, at the weapons bristling from every ship, at the cold efficiency of their formation, Dren understood why the precursors had been afraid. The Velkari had spent 10,000 years believing that peace was always the answer, that violence was never justified, that intelligent beings could always find a way to compromise. Humanity was going to teach them a different lesson. The shuttle ride to the human flagship felt like the longest journey of Dren's life. Through the window, he could see the human ships up close. They were scarred with battle damage that had been repaired. These ships had fought before. These crews knew war. The flagship was named the UES Valiant. It was 3 times the size of the largest Velkari station. As the shuttle approached, Dren saw weapons tracking his every move. The humans were ready for anything. The hangar bay opened and Dren's shuttle set down on the deck. Human soldiers lined the walls wearing armor and carrying weapons. They did not point them at Dren, but he could see they were ready to use them in an instant. Admiral Carter was waiting at the end of the hangar. She was shorter than Dren expected, but there was something in the way she stood that made her seem larger. This was someone who commanded respect not through size or threats, but through sheer presence. Ambassador Dren, she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Welcome aboard the Valiant. Dren took her hand carefully. Humans had 5 fingers instead of the... The war room on the UES Valiant was unlike anything Dren had ever seen. Holographic displays covered every wall, showing star maps, fleet positions, and tactical data that updated in real time. Human officers moved through the space with quiet efficiency, speaking in low voices and working at stations that Dren did not understand. Admiral Helen Carter stood at the center of it all, studying a three-dimensional map of Velkari space. Red markers showed where the swarm had already taken territory. Orange markers showed colonies that were under threat. The amount of red was terrifying. "Your people fought well," Carter said without looking away from the display. "Given your lack of military infrastructure, you held them off longer than expected." Dren felt shame heat his face. "We are not warriors, Admiral. We have never needed to be. Our ships are designed for exploration and trade, not combat." "I understand." Carter finally turned to face him. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. My fleet is here to help you, but to do that effectively, I need you to trust us." "Can you do that?" "I called you here," Dren said. "That required trust." "Good." Carter gestured to a tall human man in a different uniform. "This is General Kyle Brooks. He commands our ground forces." "General, brief the ambassador." Brooks stepped forward. He was younger than Carter but had the same sharp eyes. "Ambassador, we have analyzed the swarm's attack patterns based on the data you provided. They operate on a simple principle: overwhelm and consume. They do not hold territory or establish supply lines. They simply spread, eating everything in their path and using those resources to produce more swarm units." "Yes," Dren said. "We learned this too late. Our attempts to negotiate only gave them time to grow stronger." "The swarm does not negotiate," Brooks said flatly. "They are a hive mind. Every unit is connected to a central intelligence. The good news is that this makes them predictable. The bad news is that it also makes them very efficient." Carter activated another display. "We have located their primary staging area, a Velkari colony world you call Thessia Prime. They took it 3 weeks ago and have been using it as a base to launch deeper strikes into your territory." Dren felt his heart sink. Thessia Prime was home to 6 million Velkari. "Our fleet tried to retake it. We lost half our remaining ships in the attempt." "We are not going to retake it," Carter said coldly. "We are going to sterilize it." The word made Dren's blood run cold. "Admiral, there may still be survivors. Velkari who are hiding, waiting for rescue." "There are no survivors, Ambassador." A new voice spoke. A woman with dark hair and a flight suit approached. "Commander Lisa Grant, Fighter Operations. I led a reconnaissance flight over Thessia Prime 6 hours ago. The swarm has converted the entire biosphere. Nothing living remains except swarm organisms." Dren wanted to argue, but he saw the truth in her eyes. Commander Grant had seen what the swarm did to worlds. She knew there was no hope. "How many ships will you send?" Dren asked quietly. "All of them," Carter said. Dren stared at her. "All 300? For one colony?" "Ambassador, you need to understand how humanity fights." Carter's voice was hard. "We do not do half measures. We do not leave threats behind us. When we engage an enemy, we do so with overwhelming force. The swarm has taken Thessia Prime. We are going to take it back and make sure they can never use it again." Within 12 hours, the human fleet was moving. Dren watched from the observation deck as the massive ships aligned into formation. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Each vessel moved with perfect precision, slotting into position like pieces of a puzzle. "Impressive, are they not?" a voice said beside him. Dren turned to see General Brooks had joined him. "I have never seen anything like it," Dren admitted. "The Velkari fleet never achieved such coordination." "It takes practice," Brooks said. "And a lot of war. Humanity has been fighting since before we reached the stars. We learned early that survival means organization, discipline, and the willingness to do whatever it takes." "The precursor database said humanity was dangerous," Dren said. "That your species was too violent to be allowed freedom in the galaxy." Brooks was quiet for a moment. "The precursors were not wrong, Ambassador. We are violent. We have fought wars that killed billions of our own people. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we unified." He looked at Dren. "But we learned something from all that violence. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. We learned that the strong have a duty to protect the weak." "Is that why you came?" "Duty? Partly." Brooks smiled slightly. "But also because when we heard your call, every single person in the fleet volunteered to respond. Nobody had to order them to come. They wanted to help. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, and the stars outside turned to streaks of light. The journey to HFY Prime would take 18 hours. Dren spent that time learning about humanity. He met dozens of humans, soldiers and pilots and engineers. They came from a dozen different worlds across their 40 colony systems. They spoke different languages and came from different cultures, but they all served together under the United Earth Defense Force. A young soldier named Captain Danny White showed Dren the Marine barracks. The soldiers were preparing their equipment, checking weapons that looked far too large and dangerous. But they laughed and joked with each other like children, completely at ease despite the coming battle. "Are you not afraid?" Dren asked. Captain White looked surprised by the question. "Of course I am. Anyone who says they are not afraid before battle is either lying or crazy. But fear is what keeps you alive. You learn to use it to let it sharpen your focus. How many battles have you fought?" "This will be my 8th deployment," White said. "I have fought pirates in the outer colonies, suppressed a rebellion on New Mars, and helped evacuate civilians during the Titan Station disaster. This is what I signed up for. Why? Why choose to fight?" White paused in his equipment check. "My grandfather fought in the colony wars. Half my family was killed when the separatists bombed our station. I grew up in refugee camps watching people suffer because nobody could stop the violence." He looked at Dren. "I joined because I never want another kid to grow up like I did. If I can fight so others do not have to, then that is worth it." Dren was beginning to understand. Humanity was not violent for the sake of violence. They fought because they had learned the cost of not fighting. They had suffered, and that suffering had taught them to protect others from the same fate. 18 hours later, the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the HFY Prime system. The planet hung in space like a diseased eye. The once green and blue world was now covered in dark purple and black growths. Swarm bioships orbited the planet in the thousands, and more were being grown in massive organic shipyards on the surface. The human fleet spread out in attack formation. Dren watched from the Valiant's bridge as Admiral Carter gave her orders in a calm, clear voice. "All ships, battle stations. Fighter wings prepare for launch. Fire control. Lock weapons on designated targets. Rules of engagement are simple. If it moves and it is not us, you kill it." Dren felt his stomach twist. This was really happening. The humans were going to attack thousands of swarm ships with just 300 of their own. "Admiral," Dren said carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider. The numbers are against us." Carter did not take her eyes off the display. "Ambassador, with respect, you do not understand warfare. Numbers matter, but so do tactics, training, and firepower. The swarm has numbers. We have everything else." She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Carter. The swarm took this world from our allies. They killed millions of innocent people. Today we take it back. Today we show them what happens when they threaten those under our protection. All units, you are cleared to engage." The fleet moved forward as one, and then the fighters launched. Dren watched in amazement as thousands of small craft poured from the carrier ships. They formed up into precise formations, each group moving with perfect coordination. Commander Grant led the first wave, her voice crackling over the communication channels. "All wings, this is Grant. Target priority is swarm command nodes. Hit them hard and fast. Watch your spacing and cover your wingman. Let us show these bugs what Earth can do." The fighters accelerated, racing toward the swarm fleet at impossible speeds. The swarm ships moved to intercept, launching their own fighter organisms. The two forces met in the explosion of weapons fire and violence, but the human pilots were better. So much better. Dren watched as human fighters danced through the swarm formations, their weapons tearing apart enemy ships with precise fire. When a human pilot ran out of ammunition, they did not retreat. They flew straight at swarm ships, ejecting at the last second as their fighter smashed into the enemy vessel at full speed. "Insane," Dren whispered. "Brave," Carter corrected. "Those pilots know that every swarm ship they destroy is one less ship that can threaten your people. They are willing to sacrifice their fighters to achieve that." The capital ships moved in behind the fighter screen. The UES Valiant and her sister dreadnoughts opened fire with weapons that made the void itself seem to scream. Massive kinetic rounds crossed the distance between fleets at a significant percentage of light speed. Where they hit, the human fleet did not rest after HFY Prime. Within 24 hours, they were moving toward the next swarm stronghold. Admiral Carter called it momentum. General Brooks called it not giving the enemy time to adapt. Dren simply called it exhausting. He had returned to Velkari Prime to brief the council, but they could barely believe his report. 300 human ships had destroyed thousands of swarm vessels in a single battle. The council members who had voted against calling humanity now sat in stunned silence. What are they? Council member Vera asked. What kind of species fights like this? Dren thought about the humans he had met. Captain Danny White and his soldiers preparing for battle with jokes and laughter. Commander Lisa Grant leading her fighters into impossible odds without hesitation. Admiral Carter calculating acceptable losses with the same calm she used to order breakfast. They are survivors, Dren said finally. A species that learned to fight because the alternative was extinction. And now they fight for others so those others do not have to learn the same lessons. The council wanted to debate, to discuss the philosophical implications of their new allies. But there was no time. Reports were flooding in from across Velkari space. The human fleet was not simply defending territory. They were hunting. Human battle groups spread out across a dozen systems, seeking out every swarm presence they could find. Small swarm forces that had been raiding Velkari outposts were being tracked down and eliminated. It was methodical and brutal and completely effective. Dren received a message from Admiral Carter 3 days later. She wanted him to visit the human forward base they had established on New Haven, one of the Velkari colony worlds that the swarm had threatened, but not yet attacked. When Dren arrived, he barely recognized the place. The humans had transformed a small Velkari settlement into a military fortress in less than a week. Prefabricated buildings covered what had been farmland. Landing pads filled every open space. And everywhere, thousands of human soldiers worked with incredible efficiency. General Kyle Brooks met Dren at the landing pad. Ambassador, welcome to Forward Operating Base Shield. I wanted you to see what we are building here. It is impressive, Dren admitted, though the sight of so many weapons and soldiers made him uncomfortable. But why here? New Haven is far from the swarm front lines. For now, Brooks said, but our analysis suggests the swarm will push in this direction within 3 weeks. When they do, we will be ready. He gestured for Dren to follow. But that is not why I asked you here. There is someone I want you to meet. They walked through the base, passing human soldiers who saluted General Brooks with sharp precision. Dren noticed that some of the soldiers looked very young, barely adults. Others had gray hair and scars that spoke of many battles. All of them moved with purpose. Brooks led him to a building marked as medical. Inside, human doctors worked alongside Velkari physicians. Injured Velkari civilians filled the beds, receiving treatment from the human medical teams. The swarm raids left hundreds of wounded, Brooks explained. Your medical facilities were overwhelmed. Our doctors are helping. Dren watched as a human doctor carefully treated a young Velkari child who had been burned in a swarm attack. The doctor spoke softly to the child, smiling and making silly faces to distract from the pain. The child laughed despite the injuries. Lieutenant Maya Torres, Brooks called. Can you join us? The doctor finished bandaging the child and came over. She was young, with kind eyes and hands that moved with practiced skill. General Ambassador, how can I help? Tell the ambassador what you did before joining the military, Brooks said. Torres looked surprised. I was a civilian doctor on Earth. I ran a clinic in the recovery zones treating people affected by the resource wars. Then why join the military? Dren asked. Because I can help more people this way, Torres said simply. The wars on Earth taught me that sometimes you need to fight to protect those who cannot fight for themselves. I am not a soldier, but I can save the people that soldiers protect. That is my contribution. After Torres returned to her patients, Dren turned to Brooks. You brought me here to show me that humans are not just warriors. I brought you here to show you that humans are complete people, Brooks corrected. Yes, we fight. Yes, we are good at violence. But we also heal. We also build. We do whatever is necessary to protect innocent lives. They continued the tour. Brooks showed him the engineering teams rebuilding damaged Velkari infrastructure. Human technicians working with Velkari engineers to strengthen defensive systems. Human supply officers distributing food and medicine to refugee camps. In one area, human soldiers were teaching young Velkari basic self-defense. Not military training, but simple techniques to escape danger and protect themselves. The Velkari students were clumsy and uncertain, but the human instructors were patient and encouraging. Your people have never had to think about these things, Brooks observed. You built a civilization on peace and trust. That is admirable. But the universe is not always peaceful and not every species is trustworthy. So you will teach us to fight? Dren asked. We will teach you to survive, Brooks corrected. There is a difference. Fighting is what we do, so you do not have to, but you should know how to protect yourselves when we are not here. You plan to leave? Brooks looked at him seriously. Eventually, yes. This is your space ambassador, your home. We are here to help you through this crisis, but we will not stay forever. When the swarm is dealt with, we will return to our own territory. The thought should have been comforting, but Dren found himself worried instead. What would the Velkari do when the humans left? Could they defend themselves against the next threat? That evening, Dren joined a group of human soldiers for their meal. Captain Danny White was there, along with a dozen others from his Marine unit. They welcomed Dren warmly, making space for him at their table and offering him human food to try. The soldiers talked and laughed, sharing stories about their homes and families. One soldier showed pictures of her children back on Mars. Another talked about his husband who served on a different ship. They were so normal, so ordinary. It was hard to reconcile these friendly people with the warriors who had destroyed thousands of swarm ships. Ambassador, Captain White said, can I ask you something? What do the Velkari think of us? Honestly, Dren considered his words carefully. The Council is grateful for your help. But they are also afraid. Your ships, your weapons, your willingness to fight, it is beyond anything we have ever experienced. We scare you, White said. It was not a question. Yes, Dren admitted. The precursors warned us about humanity. They said your species was too dangerous to be free in the galaxy. The table grew quiet. The soldiers exchanged looks. Finally, an older sergeant spoke up. The precursors were not wrong, Ambassador. We are dangerous. We have done terrible things to each other throughout our history, but we learned from those mistakes. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. Our purpose, White added, is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight so others do not have to. We kill so others can live in peace. That is what it means to be human. A young soldier, barely out of training by the look of him, spoke up nervously. My grandmother lived through the colony wars. She told me stories about watching her colony get attacked, seeing people die because nobody came to help. When I heard about your people, about the swarm attacking you, I knew I had to volunteer, because I never want anyone else to feel what my grandmother felt. Dren felt something shift inside him. These were not monsters. They were not the mindless killers the precursors had warned about. They were people who had learned hard lessons and chose to use that knowledge to help others. Thank you, Dren said quietly. Thank you for coming when we called. The next morning, alarms woke the entire base. The swarm had been detected moving toward New Haven. Not a raiding party, but a full invasion force. Hundreds of bioships heading straight for the colony. General Brooks mobilized the entire base within minutes. Human soldiers rushed to defensive positions. Fighter pilots ran for their craft. The civilians, both human and Velkari, were evacuated to underground shelters. Dren stood in the command center watching the displays as the swarm approached. How long until they arrive? 4 hours, Brooks said calmly. More than enough time. Admiral Carter is bringing the fleet, but we can hold until they get here. You have 5,000 soldiers, Dren protested. The swarm has hundreds of ships. We have 5,000 soldiers, orbital defense platforms, ground-based artillery, and prepared positions, Brooks corrected. And we have something the swarm does not have. We have the will to win. The swarm arrived exactly on schedule. Their ships descended toward New Haven like a dark storm, blotting out the sun. The human defenses opened fire immediately. Dren watched as humanity fought a defensive battle for the first time. It was different from the assault on Thessia Prime. Here, the humans could not rely on overwhelming force. They had to be smart, efficient, and brave beyond belief. The orbital platforms fired first, their weapons cutting through swarm ships before they could land. But there were too many. Dozens of swarm bioships crashed into the ground around the base, and swarm organisms poured out in the thousands. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of New Haven. The human fleet had pushed the swarm back across 4 systems, destroying their forward bases and hunting down their scattered forces. The Velkari people were beginning to hope again, beginning to believe they might actually survive. But in the command center of the UES Valiant, Admiral Helen Carter stood before a holographic display that showed a very different picture. General Kyle Brooks and Commander Lisa Grant stood beside her, their faces grim. "Show him," Carter said. Dren approached the display. It showed the region of space beyond Velkari territory, the area where the swarm had first appeared. Red markers filled the screen, thousands upon thousands of them. "What am I looking at?" Dren asked, though part of him already knew. "The main swarm fleet," Brooks said quietly. "Everything we have been fighting so far was just their advance force. This is the real invasion." The numbers were staggering. 15,000 bioships, maybe more. Enough to overwhelm any defense, to consume entire civilizations. They were still 3 weeks away, but they were coming. And nothing could stop them. "We can evacuate," Dren said desperately. "Load everyone onto ships and flee deeper into the galaxy." "And the swarm will follow," Carter said. "They do not stop, Ambassador. If we run, they will hunt down every refugee ship. Your entire species will be extinct within a year." "Then what do we do?" Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated her communication system. "Get me a direct link to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Authorization Carter 77 Tango." The holographic display changed, showing an older human man in a different uniform. He had more medals and insignia than anyone Dren had seen before. This had to be someone very important in the human command structure. "Admiral Carter," the man said. "I was expecting your call." "Fleet Admiral Richard Hayes," Carter said formally. "I am invoking Article 9 of the Sentinel Protocol, requesting full fleet mobilization to Velkari space." Hayes nodded slowly. "I have been monitoring your reports. The situation is worse than we anticipated." "Yes, sir. The enemy force is beyond what my task force can handle. We need the full might of the United Earth Defense Force." "Do you understand what you are asking for, Helen?" Hayes said. "Full mobilization means pulling every available warship from every sector. It means leaving our own territory vulnerable. It means committing everything we have to protecting another species." "I understand, sir." "And you believe it is necessary?" Carter looked at Dren, then back at Hayes. "Sir, if we let the swarm consume the Velkari, they will only grow stronger. They will continue spreading. Eventually, they will reach human space. Better to stop them here now when we have allies and support. Better to fight this battle on ground we choose." Hayes studied her through the hologram. "You are asking me to risk the entire United Earth Defense Force on a species we met 3 weeks ago?" "No, sir," Carter said firmly. "I am asking you to honor the principles that humanity was founded on. That we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That we stand against extinction and darkness. That when someone calls for help, we answer." She paused. "The Velkari called for help, sir. We answered with 300 ships. Now I am asking us to answer with everything we have." The silence stretched. Dren held his breath. The fate of his entire species hung on this human's decision. Finally, Hayes spoke. "Full mobilization approved. You will have your Armada, Admiral. The 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th fleets will jump to Velkari space within 7 days. 5,000 warships. 200,000 Marines. Everything we can spare and some things we probably should not." He leaned forward. "Do not make me regret this, Helen." "You will not, sir." "Thank you." The connection ended. Carter turned to Dren. "Ambassador, I need you to return to your people and prepare them. In 1 week, more human ships will arrive than have ever been gathered in one place. Your people will be frightened. They need to understand that we are here to help, not to conquer." Dren returned to Velkari Prime in a daze. The council met immediately when they heard the news. 5,000 human warships. The number was incomprehensible. "This is an invasion," one council member protested. "They are taking over our space." "They are protecting our space," Dren corrected. "The main swarm fleet is coming. Without human help, we are extinct. With it, we have a chance. At what cost?" Vera asked. "What will humanity demand in return for this protection? Our resources? Our territory? Our freedom?" "They have demanded nothing," Dren said. "In 3 weeks, they have fought and died for us without asking for anything in return. Their only requirement is that we trust them to do what they came here to do." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, there was no real choice. The Velkari could accept human help or face certain death. They voted to allow the full human fleet into their space. 7 days later, the Armada arrived. Dren stood on an observation platform in orbit around Velkari Prime, watching as jump signatures lit up the darkness. One after another, massive human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. They kept coming. Dreadnoughts larger than cities. Carriers that launched fighter wings numbering in the thousands. battleships bristling with weapons, cruisers and destroyers and support vessels. The fleet stretched across space like a metal constellation. The Velkari people watched from their world below. Some prayed, some wept. All of them understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity had mobilized its entire military might to protect a species they barely knew. A new ship appeared at the center of the formation. It was larger than any other vessel, a super dreadnought that made even the Valiant look small. The name was painted on its hull in letters 100 meters tall, UES Dominion. Ambassador Dren, a voice crackled over the communication system. This is Fleet Admiral Richard Hayes. I am coming aboard your station. Please prepare to receive me. An hour later, Dren stood in the docking bay as Fleet Admiral Hayes arrived with an honor guard of Marines. Hayes was older than Carter, with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades of command. But his eyes were sharp and alert, taking in every detail. Ambassador, Hayes said, shaking Dren's hand. Thank you for trusting us with your people's safety. Thank you for coming, Dren said, though I admit we did not expect such a response. The Sentinel Protocol exists for exactly this reason, Hayes said. When the precursors created the ancient gates and networks, they established rules. One of those rules is that apex species have a duty to protect lesser species from extinction-level threats. Humanity takes that duty seriously. Lesser species? The term stung. Hayes must have seen Dren's reaction. I apologize. That is the precursor terminology, not mine. You are not lesser, Ambassador. You are simply different. Your people built a civilization on peace and diplomacy. That is admirable. But sometimes peace must be defended with force. They walked through the station toward the command center. Everywhere, Velkari stopped and stared at the human admiral and his guards. Hayes nodded politely to each one, seemingly at ease despite being surrounded by aliens. In the command center, Admiral Carter was waiting along with the other human commanders. Hayes greeted each of them formally, then turned to the strategic display. Show me what we are facing. Brooks activated the display. The main swarm fleet was now just 2 weeks away. The red markers filled half the screen. Estimated strength is 15,000 bioships. They move in coordinated swarms, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. Our intelligence suggests they have a central command node, a queen organism that directs the entire hive mind. Can we target this queen? Hayes asked. If we can locate it, Commander Grant said. Our scout missions have been unable to penetrate deep enough into their formation to identify command structures. Hayes studied the display in silence. Then he began issuing orders. We will not wait for them to reach Velkari space. We will meet them halfway. Admiral Carter, you will command the vanguard. 10 carrier groups, 200 assault ships. Your mission is to punch through their outer formations and locate the Queen. Commander Grant, your fighter wings will screen the advance. And the main fleet? Carter asked. We'll follow behind you in 3 waves, Hayes said. When you locate the Queen, we will bring everything down on that position. We are going to decapitate this hive mind in one strike. That is extremely risky, Brooks noted. If we commit everything to one attack and miss the Queen, we will be surrounded. Yes, Hayes agreed. But it is our best chance. A prolonged battle of attrition favors the swarm. They can replace losses faster than we can. We need to end this quickly and decisively. Dren listened as the humans planned the largest space battle in galactic history. They spoke of acceptable losses and tactical priorities with the same calm he used to discuss trade agreements. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring at the same time. Over the next week, Dren watched humanity prepare for war. The fleet organized itself with precision that seemed almost inhuman. Every ship had a role. Every crew knew their mission. And every single person, from the fleet admiral down to the newest recruit, believed they could win. Dren spent time with different human crews trying to understand them better. He met a young pilot named Jake who had joined the fleet too. The human fleet met the swarm at a point between stars, in the empty darkness where no planets existed and no life had ever thrived. It was a place of nothing, and it was about to become the site of the largest battle in recorded galactic history. Dren watched from the Velkari observation station, billions of kilometers away but with sensors focused on the battle space. Every Velkari who could access a display was watching. Their entire species held its breath as 5,000 human warships faced 15,000 swarm bioships. The odds were 3-1 against humanity. Any reasonable analysis said the humans should lose. But the humans did not fight based on what was reasonable. Admiral Helen Carter commanded the vanguard from the UES Valiant. 10 carrier groups, 200 assault ships, and Commander Lisa Grant's entire fighter wing. Their mission was simple and suicidal. Break through the swarm's outer shell and find the Queen. All units, this is Carter. The Admiral's voice crackled across every communication channel. The swarm thinks numbers will save them. They are wrong. Today we show them what happens when they threaten innocence under our protection. Today we show them humanity. All ships engage at will. The vanguard accelerated to attack speed. Behind them, the main human fleet held position in 3 massive waves, waiting for Carter to create the opening they needed. The swarm moved to intercept. Thousands of bioships surged forward like a living wall. They had numbers and mass. They had killed civilizations before. They did not understand that they were facing something different now. Commander Grant launched first. Her fighter wings burst from the carriers in perfect formation. Thousands of small craft moving like a single organism. But where the swarm moved with hive mind efficiency, the humans moved with practice skill and individual initiative. All wings, this is Grant. Target those command nodes. I want a path through their lines. Show these bugs how Earth's children fly. The fighters hit the swarm line like a spear through flesh. Grant led from the front, her weapons tearing through bioship after bioship. Behind her, human pilots executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. They flew through debris fields and weapons fire with precision that made the Velkari gasp in amazement. When swarm fighter organisms tried to intercept, they found themselves outmatched. Human pilots had trained for this their entire careers. They knew every trick, every tactic. And when their weapons ran dry, they became weapons themselves, ramming swarm ships at full speed and ejecting at the last possible second. Dren watched as one human pilot's fighter was crippled by swarm fire. Instead of retreating, the pilot accelerated directly into a cluster of bioships, destroying 6 of them in the resulting explosion before ejecting. Another fighter immediately swooped in to recover the pilot, all while maintaining formation and continuing to fight. The carrier groups pushed through the gap Grant's fighters created. The massive ships unleashed their weapons at point-blank range, missiles by the thousands, kinetic rounds traveling at relativistic speeds, energy weapons that could boil oceans. The swarm ships caught in that assault simply ceased to exist. But the swarm had numbers. For every bioship the humans destroyed, 2 more moved in to replace it. The vanguard was being surrounded, pressed from all sides by an enemy that did not care about casualties. All ships, maintain formation, Carter ordered calmly. Do not break ranks. Support your neighboring vessels. We keep pushing forward. The UES Valiant shuddered as swarm weapons hit her shields. Alerts flashed across her bridge, but Carter ignored them. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical display, searching for the pattern that would reveal the Queen's location. There, she said suddenly, pointing at a cluster of readings deep in the swarm formation. Enhanced biosignatures. That has to be it. All ships, new heading. We are going straight for the center. Admiral, that will take us into the heart of their fleet, her tactical officer protested. I know. Inform Fleet Admiral Hayes. Tell him we found the target. And tell him to bring everything. Behind the vanguard, the main human fleet received Carter's signal. Fleet Admiral Richard Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Dominion, watching as the tactical display updated with the Queen's location. All units, this is Hayes. Admiral Carter has located the target. First and second waves advance to assault positions. Third wave, hold in reserve. He paused, looking at the officers around him. Today we end this threat. Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. All ships full attack. 2,000 warships surged forward, joining the vanguard in its push toward the Swarm Queen. The space between fleets disappeared in seconds, and then it was chaos. Ship-to-ship combat at ranges so close that tactics became instinct. Human captains made split-second decisions, trusting their training and their crews. Swarm bioships tried to overwhelm with numbers, but the humans fought with a coordination that came from centuries of warfare. General Kyle Brooks commanded the Marine forces, ready to deploy if needed. He watched the battle from his command ship, tracking casualties and preparing his troops for boarding actions. The numbers were climbing. 500 human ships damaged or destroyed, 10,000 casualties. The cost was high, but the mission continued. Lieutenant Maya Torres worked in a field hospital ship, treating wounded as they arrived from damaged vessels. The casualties came in waves, and Torres and her medical team worked without rest. Burns and blast trauma and decompression injuries. She saved who she could and said prayers for those she could not. The Vanguard punched deeper into the swarm formation. The Valiant's shields failed and armor took direct hits. Crew compartments were breached. People died, but Carter kept the ship moving forward, kept the fleet pushing toward the Queen. Target in visual range, her sensor officer reported. The main display showed it. The Swarm Queen was massive, 10 times larger than the largest human dreadnought. It was surrounded by thousands of smaller bioships, all dedicated to its protection. Bioorganic armor covered its hull, and weapons grew from its body like tumors. All weapons fire, Carter ordered. The Valiant and her sister ships opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic rounds hit the Queen's armor at relativistic speeds. Fusion warheads detonated across its surface. Energy weapons carved burning lines through bioorganic matter. The Queen screamed. The sound transmitted across every frequency, a shriek of pain and rage that made human ears bleed and instruments overload. The swarm around it went berserk, throwing themselves at the human ships with suicidal fury. But the main fleet had arrived. Fleet Admiral Hayes brought 2,000 warships down on the Queen's position. They fired in perfect synchronization, a concentrated barrage that no living thing could survive. The Queen's armor shattered. Its weapons fell silent, and when the UES Dominion fired its main gun, a relativistic kill vehicle traveling at 90% light speed, the Queen simply exploded. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Without the Queen's coordination, the hive mind collapsed. Bioships stopped responding to threats. Some continued attacking mindlessly. Others simply drifted, their organic systems shutting down without guidance. The human fleet did not hesitate. This was the moment they had fought for. All units, this is Hayes. Execute termination protocol. I want every swarm ship in this system destroyed. No survivors. No retreat. We end this here and now. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The human fleet systematically hunted down every swarm vessel in the system. Hunter groups pursued fleeing bioships into deep space. Fighter wings burned out swarm organisms that tried to hide in debris fields. Capital ships reduced dead bioships to atoms with sustained weapons fire. It took 3 days. 3 days of constant warfare, of hunting and killing and ensuring that nothing remained. The human fleet suffered 800 ships destroyed and 60,000 casualties. But when it was over, the swarm threat in Velkari space was extinct. Dren stood on the observation deck of the Velkari command station, watching as the human fleet began returning to Velkari space. They came back battered and scarred. Every ship showed damage. Every crew had lost people. But they came back victorious. The Velkari people flooded the streets of their cities in celebration. They had been saved. Their species would survive. And it was because humanity had answered their call. When Admiral Carter returned to Velkari Prime, Dren met her at the orbital platform. The Admiral looked exhausted. Her uniform was dirty and there were bandages under her sleeve. But she stood straight and proud. Ambassador Dren, she said, offering her hand. The swarm threat has been eliminated. Your people are safe. At terrible cost, Dren said, taking her hand. 60,000 of your people died for us. 60,000 people died protecting innocents from extinction. Carter corrected gently. They died doing what humanity does best, standing between the darkness and those who cannot fight it themselves. The Velkari Council held a memorial service for the fallen humans. Every city on every world observed a moment of silence. Monuments were erected listing the names of those who died defending a species they barely knew. But the humans reacted differently to their losses. They held military funerals with honor and respect. They mourned their dead as heroes who fulfilled their duty. And then they moved forward because there was still work to do.